Hey guys, welcome back to Be the Standard. We are here with a very special guest, George Hayworth. He is the founder and co-host of the Present Fathers podcast, as well as the founder of Elite Sentinel Coaching. He's a husband, he's a father, and he's also the first guy to ever reach out to myself about Be the Standard and really express genuine interest in everything that it is that we're looking to accomplish here. So great to have you here. It's been 5 months in the making to get here. Man. And really just excited. This has been a great weekend, great experience getting to know you better in person. So yeah, man, welcome.
Dude, it's awesome to be here. It's so good to finally meet you face to face. Like last night, hanging out, you getting in a day early and getting to know each other. It's awesome, man. So
yeah,
thanks
man,
for having me.
Sure, absolutely. And you know, one of the things, I'm just going to get things kicked right off here, is one of the things that I really like that you're doing is this Elite Sentinel coaching, right? It really feeds into, you know, some of the stuff that other guests have done, but maybe a little bit differently, is just the idea of creating strong men, creating men that are good husbands, good fathers, focused, and doing all the right things. So talk to me a little bit about what you're doing in that space, because you know, I say this all the time as somebody who grew up without a father, how important it is to be a strong, positive role model in the home, outside the home, but in particularly to your children. So let's start there and tell me a little bit about what you're doing there.
Yeah, so first and foremost is I have an immense amount of empathy for guys out there who are struggling because, like, I was one of you, you know? I did not learn, like, we were talking about this last night, like, when did I become a man? When did you become a man, right? Like, in our 30s, our 40s, right? Like, and that's not the right answer, you know? And so, like, my heart goes out to everyone who feels maybe like, I don't really know, and they got all these struggles and challenges and stuff, because, like, that was me. And so I wanted to do something that's going to actually help guys get out of where they're stuck and put them back on the path to where they can actually feel like they're conquering life, you know? Because we're not meant to just breathe air and then one day kick the bucket. Like, that's not living. That's just slowly dying, right? And so, you know, I put a lot of thought and effort into how do we solve that problem, right? And so we need a coach. You have a coach for basketball. You have a mentor in the military. Like, you have trainers train you in whatever the skill is. And unfortunately, there's a huge lack of fatherhood or present fathers teaching young boys how to be real men. So we need coaches now. And hopefully one day I put myself out of a job, right? But that would be the ideal. But like you and I can both relate on, like, we didn't really understand authentic masculinity until way later in life, right? And we've made all these mistakes now. It's a lot harder to change course. So if we can start with younger men and set them up for success, how much better is our society going to look like, right? This is way beyond me, right? And that's the ultimate goal there.
Yeah, and I think the most important thing that you just said, out of everything you just said, is that, you know, you've been that guy. So,
100%.
you know, you have that experience, you have that resume, you have that credibility. And I think that, again, I think you had a lot of people out there trying to coach, trying to, you know, bring people to the next level or whatever the case is.
Right.
And they're fake. They haven't been that guy. I don't want to hear from the guy. If you can't prove to me that you've been the guy, I don't want to hear from you.
Right.
And I don't want you coaching me. I don't want you telling me how to. It's like having a financial advisor who's never handled anybody's finances before.
Right.
Right? So the fact that you openly admit, you show that vulnerability and you say, I've been that guy. And guess what? Now my shit's together. Still a work in progress, because we're all always a work in progress.
There's always new levels.
100%.
Yeah.
And the fact that you're doing that and presenting it in that way, it changes the game, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I needed help. I needed coaches. I needed mentors to pull me out of my own, you know, inadequacy or my own excuses or my own failures, right? And get out of my own way. And it wasn't until I started doing those things that my life improved, right? Or my marriage improved and how I show up as a father improved. And so, like, I want to be able to help that older version of me, right? Because now I'm on the other end of it. And to have these things now, the way life goes for me now is just so drastically different in all the right ways. Like, I just want that for I want every man to win, you know?
Yeah. And just to be more specific, you know, for the guys out there listening, the guys that are thinking to themselves, like, you know, look, I look at myself in the mirror. I don't like what I see. I don't like, you know, the way I'm treating my wife. I know I'm not being a good husband. I know I'm not being a good father. You know, they're going through, right? Like the things that you said you went through.
Yeah.
You know, specifically, what are some of the struggles that you had that kind of brought you to that point where it's like, time to get my shit together, time to be the man that, you know, my wife deserves, my kids deserve.
Yeah.
You know, how, like, talk to me about, you know, what that looked like, you know, and some of those struggles that you had that opened your eyes.
Certainly. Yeah. So, I mean, we don't have to unpack my whole life story, but a lot of it started in childhood for me. You know, we grew up in a very intense home, lots of yelling, lots of fighting, very codependent. And my parents split up. They separated when I was 15. They divorced completely when I was 16. And I was a very small kid, right? I was like, as a freshman in high school, I was like 5 foot, 100 pounds. You know, the guys on the basketball team jokingly called me Mighty Mouse. And, you know, so that I always felt like this small, insecure, not masculine boy, right? And then my parents divorced, and now I have all these insecurities just piling on top of each other. So, I mean, I was looking for validation. I had this act, right? Like, oh, I got to act tough and try and be all these things to everyone else, right? Wear all these masks in all these situations. Because if they really saw how weak and pathetic I am inside, they would reject me or they'd ridicule me and stuff, right? So that was a lot of my internal monologue for many years. I joined the Army. I think if I'm really, really honest with a lot of my motivation, I wanted to serve my country. I wanted to be, you know, I'm very idealistic.
And I was going to ask that about the military.
But a big part of it, too, was I think I wanted to prove I was a man. I needed that validation. Like, I needed to prove I was tough, you know? And, yeah, I didn't have that validation, and I needed it. And, you know, it's sad that was the truth for me, but yeah. And so I thought then, I deceived myself that, oh, now I've been in the Army, I'm a combat vet, all that kind of stuff. Now I'm a man now, right? But I was still treating every situation in my life as this scared, insecure 16-year-old, lashing out at people, overly intense about things that I don't need to be intense about because I was treating them like life or death situations when they're really not. And so then I took that into my marriage, and I took that into how I was a father. And, you know, the way I've been married a little over 10 years now, and for most of that time, I was not the man that I should have been for my wife, you know? And so I'll lead by example on this one, where you have to swallow that pill. You have to really look in the mirror and acknowledge, you know what? I have not done these things that I should have been doing, or I'm not being this guy. And so what I found to be very true in my own experience is that for all these things I want to blame my wife about, we're all in response to my own behaviors first. Right? And instead of having empathy or compassion for her own past and her traumas and her things that she's dealing with, I beat her down with them. Or, you know, she's doing this to me, right? It's this it is victim mindset, right? But It's the blame game. And so then resentment builds, and then you start looking to satisfy your own things. You tell yourself all these justifications, right? And so I became a guy who had affairs. Right? I became this unrecognizable thing that I didn't even know who I was anymore. It's against everything I stood for, everything I believe. And I did that to my wife, and I have to live with that, you know? And to close the point on, you know, what was my pain, I had a lot to unpack. And then I also had to learn how it's my responsibility to grow myself first, but to also be there for my wife with her stuff. It's not her stuff, and well, you better figure it out. Yeah, how manly of me, right? Oh,
yeah, right.
What a big, strong man to just leave your wife to suffer through these things, right? But that was me, and it's shameful that I was that way. Fast forward a few years, with all the work we've done and all the honesty I've had about where I was really lacking, and then reaching out to people who would make me better and hold me accountable and push me and teach me how to be better because I didn't know. Our marriage is on fire now. Like, things are so drastically different. There's a lightness, there's a joyfulness that exists despite whatever life has thrown at us. I mean, we've had some really, over the last couple of months, some really intense things happen that are very difficult. But I'd say our marriage is better than it's ever been because we are connected now, and I'm actually leading my wife and helping her with these things as opposed to the blame game, right? And so, very long story, as short as possible, that's some of the things that I've dealt with. And so I understand where guys are at in their own struggles, and we may have differing traumas or differing mistakes we've made, but the root causes are almost always the same. It's that need for validation. It's you're wanting to prove it, or it's whatever, right? There's several things there that are generally unified across men.
Yeah, for sure. And I can certainly relate to so much of what you just said as far as, definitely not being a good husband, definitely not being the man that, my spouse deserved.
Yeah.
And, building up all that resentment, not communicating, and just playing the blame game, right?
Yeah.
And not being very manly and holding yourself accountable and being true to like who you really think you are. And here's the thing, like one of the things you just said that made the most sense to me is like when you said, I'm doing all these things and I don't know who the fuck I am. I didn't know, I didn't know who I was when I looked in the mirror.
I was disgusted with myself.
Yeah. And I just remember feeling like just this immense amount of like just guilt that like just couldn't get past it.
Yeah.
And, I look at it now and it just hit me probably 4 seconds ago. Like, maybe some coaching of some sort, at that time would have been highly beneficial to me.
Yeah.
But to be honest with you, I didn't even know it existed. So it's great that you guys are doing what you're doing because, I've learned in going through that experience and meeting more guys like yourself and just putting myself out there more. I've come across a lot more guys that are just all too familiar with my same exact situation.
Right.
And men need an outlet. We need that support system, that brotherhood, that tribe. And, I think it's great that you're building that through your program.
Yeah, man. In short, men are salty, right? They're stressed, angry, lonely, tired, and they're yearning for a hell of a lot more, right? Yeah. The way life is going for the modern American man is not sustainable. No one wants to be in that position, and no one, we want to just feel sorry for ourselves about it. The only antidote to it is brotherhood. The only antidote is building real connection with other guys who are actually wanting to get better. Maybe you're all stuck in a rut, but at least acknowledging, hey, we can't keep doing this. We're not just going to keep getting together and watching sports and drink beer every day, right? Which those things aren't inherently bad, but if that's your routine, that's not the standard, guys, right? So even if you're there and just the acknowledgement of this has to change, that is the first step. And then you need to find one or two guys that want to also get better or maybe are a little bit better and they're willing to take you on, so to speak, right? Having that courage up front to be like, hey, man, I think we connect pretty well. I don't really have any very close friends, just to be very honest. Like, can we start hanging out a little bit more? Because I just, at a minimum, I respect you and, like, I could use your help, right? Like, maybe that's where most men need to start to solve that stuff. But brotherhood's the only antidote because isolation is literally killing men. Right. There's the survey, 70% of men say that they don't have one close friend. 70%.
That's wild.
Like you have Mike, right? You do this podcast with Mike.
I do.
And just imagine if you didn't have that.
Yeah. But the issue with that is, there was probably a 3-4 year period where him and I kind of like, we didn't fall off. We texted a couple times a week and we always stayed in touch and whatever. But then it got to the point where we had a discussion. We were like, dude, we need to hang out. We need to see each other.
Yep.
Because every time we get together, whether it's now or whether it was, probably 6 years ago when we realized that this was an issue, we actually called it out then. Like, dude, we need each other.
Yeah.
We need to be physically present
right.
and have these discussions and about growth, about what's going on in life, about how we can be better. And we've been having these growth mindset conversations for 6 years.
Yep.
And these conversations about being better and being the standard and all these things that you see now from us are things we've been having discussions about for 5-6 years.
Right.
And it's funny because I think what happens is, and this happened to me and it happened to him, is you get caught up in life, whether it's your kids, whether it's your marriage, whether it's whatever. And I think a lot of guys just kind of give into that and fall, I don't want to say victim to it, but they fall into that routine of just...
You drift.
Yeah. You drift into this life of, well, I got this family thing and then that family thing. And so,
you're not leading.
Right. And any free time I have needs to go towards, my yard work or this or that. When in reality, it was like me and Mike were like, dude, it doesn't matter when you do it, but figure out a day, once a week and go blow off some steam with one of your buddies, whether it's just you grab dinner or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's just so important to have that connection with other men. And really be able to bounce these things off of each other because I think over time, that brotherhood and that bond just overall just makes you better and you can just learn that much more. And in your situation where you're putting together groups of men, now you got ideas and all these things flowing from all these different directions, which is a good thing, I think. More men in more of these situations that are bouncing these ideas and going through this pain together, you can grow together.
100%. And you know, let's use the context of marriage real quick, right? The reason you need a tribe of other guys, you know, you need a band of brothers, is let's say you've got a very difficult conversation you need to have with your wife. Hey, maybe talk about it with your brothers real quick to make sure that you're not thinking about things from a very selfish point of view or having some misalignment or whatever, right? Like I pressure test stuff with my trusted advisors, the men who I respect in my life. Hey man, this is the situation. Can I run this by you? What's your thought? Well, George, you sound a little intense about this. I don't think you need to be this upset about that. Like, have you considered this? Oh, no, I haven't. Wow, guess what? That conversation goes immensely better when you actually have it with your wife now, because it's not you just thinking, you know, you're not leaning on your own understanding, right?
Right.
As good as you are, you may be the best at a thing, right? Someone is going to be better than you at something else, right? And so you have something to gain from everyone. If you're all willing to actually open and be honest and have, you know, that transparency with each other, you all learn and grow together. And it's this, like, it builds an upward spiral, right? Like you're spiraling upwards higher and higher just naturally. And like, look, we've only known each other a little bit, right? Got together yesterday and went and got dinner and all that kind of stuff. Like all of our conversations were what I would consider pretty deep things, right? We weren't just talking about like, well, did you see the game or whatever? Like it wasn't the surface level stuff.
Yeah.
It's about life. It's about our issues. It's about what we're inspired by. It's when you do that more consistently, guess who shows up like better in other areas of your life? You. Like you're the best version now because you're filling your cup, right? I think most guys are on empty today. And one final point on that, like I had a 30-minute call with a guy this week. And afterwards he was like, I got more in 30 minutes with you than I've gotten from years of therapy with a counselor. You know, the person with a degree, they went to school for it. And it's like, I don't have any massive secrets, but it's like, I just understand men. We understand each other. And when we cut through the crap and honestly get to the real hearts of the issues, we solve a lot of things very quickly. Yeah. It's really not that hard. It just requires some courage up front and some humility.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I've learned just over the last 3 months, and I feel like my network's just grown so much.
Yeah. And
it's grown with just the quality and caliber of guys that are just like, holy shit, like this is solid.
Yeah.
And I see, you know, guys out there just doing these great things and you know, having that brotherhood and I think it's important what you said about getting together, bouncing ideas off each other before you just go to market with it, right?
Yeah.
You know,
well, the thing is, like marriage is the great example because it's usually the place we apply the least of our skills because we just think we're going to show up and be the husband, right? Yeah. But at work, you probably like think about all your stuff. You market test all your things, or in the military, right? You make battle plans, you make op orders, you do rehearsals and drills, and in sports, you train and do practice and all these things. You watch film, right? And then we go home. And it's like, okay, I'm going to apply none of this at home.
Yep. Because
it should be the other way around.
Exactly.
You should apply the most of it at home.
Yep.
You should apply the most of it as a father.
Yeah.
And I had this epiphany, I paid a coach to train me how to be a better husband, right? Because I needed it. And halfway through, I'm like, I am so dumb.
Yeah.
I know all this stuff. Like, I know it. I've just not used it in my home.
Yep.
Is that, yeah.
And those are things that I learned completely after I fucked it up, right? After I made all the mistakes,
me too.
It was like, after I made all the mistakes, it was like, okay, now I get it. Like,
yeah.
If I knew what I knew now, like, it's crazy. Like, I never even knew these coaching programs existed again, and I think that's why it's so good what you're doing. And the idea of, like, I've gone to Mike with things a million times and been like, and that's why Mike's my guy, and my buddy Tony, too. So I had two of them. They're not going to bullshit me. They're going to tell me, Denny, like, you said that? Like, you fucking idiot, you said that? Or, like, you're going to say that? You probably shouldn't say that. Right? So.
Well, they're killer. Yeah.
Oh, man, it's so important to, like you said, kind of rehearse these conversations. But I love the point you just made about, you know, you prepare and you practice and you do all these things for everything except for probably the things that matter the most. And I've never heard it put that way. And I think it's so true because I think, you know, everyone, you know, you take these relationships, especially marriage, right? You look at marriage theoretically as like, this is forever. Right. And it's supposed to be forever.
Yeah. I mean,
But you,
Yeah,
so you
it's a
take
vow.
Take it for granted because it's forever. Well, I can let myself go a little bit in whatever way.
Yep.
I cannot be the best father today. I can not be the best husband today. I cannot be the best man today.
Yeah.
Because tomorrow is guaranteed. My family's not going anywhere. And I think that is probably one of the biggest, keys as to like why things go south is people take it for granted and they just think that
it's stagnation.
Yeah, 100%.
And like what happens to stagnant water is it becomes poison, right? And so that happens to us, right? If we get stagnant, we start withering, right? Like a tree gets big and strong because the wind blows it and the trunk has to strengthen. And over the years, it gets bigger and more robust, right? Like it's not through being comfortable, it's through adversity. And staying stagnant in where you are today, like you should not be the same man you were 10 years ago. You should be a drastically different guy. If you're the same dude 10 years later, bro, like nowhere else in life were you that way. Even if you were a slacker in school or whatever, like you still moved up grades.
I don't want to be this guy in 1 year.
Right, exactly. So like really where that starts is you stop keeping your promises to yourself.
I say that all the time.
Yeah. And that's a huge issue. And then it's also the words we use with ourselves, right? So I have this whole section of my course is dedicated to how we talk to ourselves, that your inner monologue, your mindsets. And I hate the term mindset, honestly. It's kind of like this buzzword now, but your programming in your brain that you play on repeat is often the worst thing for you, right? In this modern age we live in. It's all the lies. It's the itty bitty committee in your head telling you all the negative things about yourself. Most of it's probably not true. We are harsher on ourselves than anyone else ever thinks, right? Like, oh, well, I messed this up. They're going to notice all the things. Most people don't care because they really don't care that much. They're too caught up in their stuff. But my point with all that is everything is mind control, all right? Everything you listen to, you hear right now, you're being mind controlled by this podcast. Mind control is not bad. It's one way or the other. It's either going to be positive or negative. So you get to choose. You get to choose what goes in your head, the things that you tell yourself, the words you're going to speak to yourself. And if the way you speak to yourself, if that was another person saying those things to you, would they be allowed to be in your life? If the answer is no, that has to change. And for most guys, that's where it really has to start. It's in that segment of their life, because you can do all these other things. You can do all your routines. You can do all the buzz things, right? But if you haven't changed in here first and what's going on between your ears, it's all just going to be an act, and you will eventually fall off because you haven't fundamentally changed yourself first. Right. And so what I'm trying to do, and what other guys like me who are genuinely trying to help men, is like my coach told me, like, be the greatest man your wife's ever known. I love that.
That's awesome.
That's all it is. Just be the best man that she's ever known. You want to have a better marriage? Be a better man. Like it's that. And this is where we can play the blame game. Right? Well, she's doing this and she's not doing that, or she should be doing that. Yeah, she should. However, what should you be doing? And what are you accountable for? And what do you own? And that's leadership, right? Like, we can't control everything, but we can control ourselves. And when you start, she's going to naturally start responding anyway, right? Yeah. So I'm getting into a lot of weeds here, but that self-talk is critical.
That's good. And that's one of the things so there's this guy, Greg Van Dyne. He's got a podcast with a Navy SEAL called Kevin Seif. They have a podcast together called Harder Not Smarter.
Okay.
And Greg's bigger on like the mental health aspect of things. He's very much a mental health advocate and psychedelics, and he's willing to do whatever it takes to make sure that vets are okay. Right? So, and not just vets, anybody. He's a very caring guy, great guy, but he talks about that a lot, is, the self-talk. And I commented on one of his posts last week and was like, yes, I reshared it and was like, yeah, you're going to be a better friend to yourself.
Oh, 100%.
Because when you do have those high standards for yourself, you do have those high expectations to yourself, and you start to fall off and start making mistakes, even the small mistakes.
Right.
You start to really chip away at, your own self-worth, your own self-belief, and it's detrimental to anything you're trying to accomplish, because it puts you in this stagnation phase of like, nope, I'm not that guy. And it might even prevent you from even like excelling or pushing forward because
Yeah, you put false ceilings on your growth. Yeah,
and it's so bad, and we all do it. I do it all the time. I think I've gotten a lot better with it. I think I've gotten a lot better with like, because I know that the man I am, I'm not really making those types of mistakes anymore.
right.
If I make a mistake, it's like, oh yeah, I messed something up at work, and guess what? I don't give a shit. But if I make a moral mistake or a conscious mistake or like something that like bears on like my character,
Right.
that pisses me off.
Yep.
But when
Well,
it comes,
it should.
yeah,
Like you should.
and that's where I start to talk bad about myself.
Exactly.
Yeah. I don't care about the other shit. Other mistakes, whatever.
Right.
But that's the shit that I start to with the negative talk, and that needs to be controlled just as much as the other stuff.
And that's where the brotherhood comes back into play. It's so important, right? Like, life's going to hit you. You're going to get punched in the teeth, and it's going to hurt sometimes.
Yep.
Like, it's just going to happen. Stuff way beyond our control. And then when those cycles start and you start talking yourself that way, that's where, like, you immediately reach out to that guy who's that man for you, right? Bro, I'm really not doing good. Like, this, and this. And maybe he says nothing. But the fact that you just admit it to another human being who actually has your back, who understands you, understands what you're feeling right now because he's a man too, who's working on being better, the weight gets off, right? The problems are still going to be there. They still have to be fixed, and you still have to step up and do all the things, right? But like that moment of being able to take a breath again is critical, because if you stay stuck in that moment where you're just keeping all the weight on you, that's how guys go down these dark paths to eventually lead to suicidal ideations and everything like that. And like this isn't like a light issue. Guys, men commit suicide 3 to 5 times more than women. So something is very broken in the way we live currently. Like, that's why I get so fired up about this stuff. It's not because, like, I'm some amazing dude who's going to just, like, change the world or whatever. No, it's like men are literally killing themselves in isolation. And we all need to help each other out a lot better.
And I think it's because Mike and I talked about this in our most recent episode, is identity. I think so many men struggle with that because so much of our worth, and not even just internally, but externally, I think we feel the pressure of our worth is tied to what we can provide.
Right, which is 25% of what it means to be a man.
If you're a great-looking guy, but you can't provide, nobody gives a shit.
Yeah.
Like, you're not going to get a great wife. Sorry.
Yeah.
Like, there aren't that many women out there that are just like, oh, yeah, you're a nice guy. Let me marry you even though you're broke and don't have shit going for you. Like, as a man,
Well, I'm training my daughter to reject that.
To reject.
Like, if you are only, the good-looking dude or whatever, like, that's the whole point, too. Is
right.
She shouldn't. She shouldn't compromise her standards for you.
Of course
and that's
not.
where you have to become the man, right? Like, you have to become the man that deserves.
Well, my point is that's why I think a lot of men, they tie their identity to that, and they put so much additional pressure on themselves. Because even if they are providing to a particular standard, it might not feel enough, right?
Yeah.
Or they may be made to feel that it's not enough. Women don't, generally speaking, have that problem. Like, if a guy loves a woman, he's going to marry her if she's a fucking barista at Starbucks. It doesn't matter to him. But, if you're a high-value woman and you're looking for, X amount of man, like, you're not going to settle, is my point. A guy will. So I think men more than women are judged on what they can provide as opposed to, who they are and, all these other features.
Well,
or
I mean, for the guys feeling that way, it's because you're not embracing. So I'll go through my 4 pillars thing, right? So there's king, warrior, mentor, and lover, okay? Those are the 4 pillars of authentic manhood, and each pillar has to be equally balanced. You want to be a real man, an authentic man, you have all 4 of these things equally balanced. So if you think like the Greek structure, right, like the Parthenon-looking thing with the pillars, if one is bigger than the other, the roof's going to tip, right?
Correct.
So we lean into the king and warrior often. Go be hard, be tough, put food on the table, right? And then we stop there. Yeah. Generally, most men, right? Yep. So you're 25 to 50% of what a man really is, right? And so we have totally neglected the fact that there's a mentor and lover pillar too. And so let me walk through these real quick. So like king, you're built for leadership, right? You're head of your household. Wherever men are, we're built to lead in some capacity. And sometimes it's just leading one other person. Like, it doesn't have to be this, doesn't mean you're like a military commander or something. Leadership is like the things we bring to the table of you're thinking about the outcomes for other people. You're doing what you can to affect those outcomes to create positive impacts in the world. It's not tyrant, right?
Yeah.
And this is where we get to the lover part at the end, is it's the balance, right? It's leading with love and compassion. So men are built for it. And that's why most men are so depressed, is because they're not leading anywhere. They're not doing what they were designed to do. They're not filling any purpose. And they wonder why they're so, anxious and depressed and feel sorry about themselves. It's because you're not filling into the king role, right? The warrior one is far beyond just the physical, right? Physical fitness is highly important. Big fan of it, right?
Yeah.
I train my body very hard to be physically fit.
Of course.
That's half the equation. The other half is to be the warrior for the things that matter most. Your ideals, your beliefs, the things that we hold dear in our society that we have seriously neglected. Look where we are today. Where were all the men for the last 30 years just letting this shit happen?
They weren't being men.
Right. So maybe they were physically tough or whatever, right? They were cowards emotionally and mentally and spiritually, and we just let our culture slide. The warrior is far beyond, like, your physical prowess and your physical ability to be violent and dangerous is hardly ever called upon. I mean,
Almost
we were
never.
both soldiers, right? How often have you shot someone or shot at someone, or like outside of a combat zone?
Right.
Never, right?
Right.
Okay, have you really had to be physically violent very often in your life? Probably not. Should you be able to? 100%, because when the moment arises, you better be able to
Yeah, be
deliver,
capable, yeah.
right? Protect, right?
Yep.
But where we stop there is we think it's only physical. There's so much more beyond it, right? And I'd argue way more important beyond the physical aspect. The mentor, right? We're made to teach, to coach each other. Like this podcast, this is mentorship right here, right? It's filling other people's minds with the things that actually change our lives to be better. And when we do that, it's extremely rewarding. One, we're helping others, right? You're giving them something they've needed, right? And it helps them level up or grow. And it's not this selfish thing, but the fulfillment that comes from that, like we talked about the favorite things about the Army, backstage, right? We all talked about how, like, when we helped another soldier rise to the occasion or whatever, like, men are built for that. And if you're not doing that, you're not, because in order to mentor first, you have to better yourself. You have to learn the things to be able to pass it on, right?
Of course.
And then the final one is the lover. And this is the one that's the most ignored, right? So go be hard, be tough, put food on the table, and that's it. Be a robot.
That's the toughest one for men.
So most people misunderstand stoicism. Stoicism is not the absence of emotions. It's the control of the emotions. It's not letting anger burst out or letting unnecessary sorrow stop you from pushing forward or whatever, right? Stoicism is initially just controlling it. But the lover is where men really, when you embrace this pillar, you transform to a tender warrior, right? And this book is called Tender Warrior, where I learned this concept. Our heart beats fiercely for the people we care about. And so if you're in a leadership role, if you really love your people and you're really concerned and compassionate for them about what the best outcomes, guess what? You're going to lead a lot better. You actually understand them. You build connection. You don't just bark orders. And so every aspect you lean into, the more that you have empathy and compassion, the more masculine you become. You don't become this weepy little thing, but you stop and think, not just with your head, but with your heart a little bit. And you empathy means you have to put yourself into the feeling of what the other person's feeling. Yep. So, like, if you're coming to me with, like, man, I'm really stressed, my girlfriend this and that, and, like, I don't even know what to do, she's threatening to leave me right now, I have two options. I can be like, well, that sounds terrible, bro. That sucks, man. It's not very empathetic, right? I'm not really feeling what you're feeling. Or I can go, oof, man, that's heavy. Well, do you need to talk about it, bro?
Yeah.
Or do you just want me to listen? Like, how can I help you? You know what I mean? I have to be willing to also feel that pain a little bit, right? Yep. Most men are so closed off from understanding their own emotions because they think it's weak or feminine that they become a robot, and everyone else does. You're not connecting anymore. Yeah. You're cutting off all your human connection, and you're built for human connection.
Yeah, no, it's awesome to have you call that out, because it's funny that Mike called me out on that on one of our episodes, because we were talking about, I was kind of going through, a little bit of my story and a little bit of my journey on just, like, growth, right? And one of the things Mike said was, he kind of asked me the question, like, what have you done differently, or what have you done to, like, implement these changes and this and that. And the biggest thing was just being that guy that would show those emotions, those softer emotions, and not having to feel like, I needed to be the guy in the room who came across as the toughest or the strongest or the most with the most conviction or whatever. I just needed to be the guy that was sure of himself, sure of his emotions, in control of his emotions.
Yeah.
But most importantly, able to show those softer emotions that, in my opinion now, in my understanding now, make you much stronger of a man.
Completely.
You know,
Yeah. Well, and you experience life fuller, right?
100%.
Like now that I am more in tune with my emotions and I control them, I do practice stoicism. Again, it's just controlling them, right? It's not letting them be in the driver's seat. You are still deciding, okay, like stressful thing happens. Am I going to get angry and pissed about it? No, okay, I am angry, but anger doesn't decide for me. I decide for me, right? That's what stoicism is. But I practice it, but when good things happen, right? Because I'm more in tune with my emotional being as a human being, you have emotions. They're higher. The highs are higher. You know, like when my daughter does something, I'm just like, you just soak in the joy of the moment more because you're more connected. It's all about connection, right? And like, this is one of the areas that men struggle with the most because somehow we've been convinced that that is weakness. And it's like, it's the opposite. It's strength. You become invincible. Like the friendship we're building and like the other guys you're meeting through this and all that, like these relationships you're building, right? It takes some vulnerability up front. It takes a little bit of kind of putting yourself out there. But now it's like, how much stronger do you feel everywhere you go now? It's like, dude, I've met all these people. They're pouring into me. Like I've learned all these things. Like you want to talk about strength. You have tools for every situation now because you had love and empathy and compassion first.
Yep. And every time I sit down with a guy like you, a guy like Nick, a guy like Steve, whoever, Joe, every time I sit down with these guys, I fucking pull out as much as I possibly can and do my very best to, like, you know, work it into real life scenarios and really apply it because, you know, I can't agree more that, and I've been the biggest culprit of this or biggest whatever, you know, of not being able to show or not properly showing the right emotions to the right people at the right times. And, you know, I revert it back now because I've gotten so much better at it that I call, and now it's something I've just called emotional intelligence, right?
It is, yeah.
It's just being able to control those emotions, I think, again, makes you more manly, makes you more masculine. And I don't know, I've just being able to show those emotions has made me so much. Some of my friends are like, who the fuck are you?
Yeah.
You know, like they don't even know who I am anymore because they're like, you know, when I served with you, you were this, or, you know, when I knew you 4 years ago, like guys that I even worked in software sales with when I was at Oracle are like, dude, you're different now. Like, you know, old Denny would have like punched that guy in the face. And I'm like, what's the point of that? Like, I don't know him. Like, I don't care. Like, you know, it's great to learn all these things and meet all these people. And, you know, it's just been, and it's what's crazy is it's happening so fast.
Right.
You know, on a relatively speaking, it's 3 months, right?
When we leverage humility as a weapon, right, and then we open up to having real connection, you can change your life rapidly. Like it seems daunting at first. Like, oh, I've got all these problems, I've got all these things that I need to solve and fix and blah blah. And because you're still stuck leaning on your own understanding, right? But when you build connection, you open yourself up to other people and start embracing these things, dude, it's not a linear equation, right? It's not point A to point B. It's exponential, right? It's a snowball picking up steam. It's getting bigger, rolling downhill. It goes faster. So like once you get it going, it only accelerates and continues to grow for you. And so like whoever you are, wherever you are listening to this, like that's step one, connect, get some brothers, right? But then start consuming things like this podcast and other things that are going to fill your mind to love yourself, give you the goodness in your brain so you're not beating yourself up all the time. And then just look for those opportunities to make incremental growth. And stuff will start to shift pretty dang quick. Yeah.
And all great stuff. I mean, I feel like we've hit pretty hard on like your coaching and what it is you're doing in that space. Now, I want to segue into your podcast because I think it's a pretty seamless transition to go from, you know, just coaching men who need it and men who are struggling and men with all the vices and things like that to, you know, when I think of your podcast, I just think strict fatherhood and being a present father.
Yeah.
And so talk to me about how you came up with that, why you came up with it, why it was important to you, and how, you know, we're here today, I think almost 2 years later.
Yeah, it's almost exactly 2 years since we started, about a month away from that point.
Yeah.
So it's me and 3 co-hosts. We've been a group of friends for a very long time. 2 of the guys are twin brothers I've known
Okay.
for like 20 years or something like that. Nice. You know, we were kids playing internet video games, and that's how we connected. But we've stayed in touch our whole lives. We've all been at each other's weddings, all that kind of stuff. Like, you know, just been lifelong friends through thick and thin. The other one, he's been part of the crew for like over a decade. So, long story short, we're just kind of looking at our culture, our society, and we're like, man, this ain't working.
So who said we're doing a podcast?
I think it was actually Justin who said we should just do a podcast. He's kind of he's like the rogue of the group a little bit. He's the fiery one who we have to filter. But no, yeah, he threw out there, and we were all like, actually, yeah, we should. And so we did, and we just started it. And the whole point was we just like, if we just help one guy be a better dad, mission accomplished, right? Sure. And so very humble beginnings, but we picked the name Present because it's kind of a dual meaning, right? So we wanted to tackle the present day, present issues, right? And it will always be present because it's day one. It's now, right? We got to solve now. But also being present. Your presence is critical as a father, right? And to be clear, it's not just being in the room. It's being intentional. So we say be present, be intentional. That's like one of our slogans.
Sure. Because
you should put thought and effort and planning and leadership. You should apply leadership skills into how you are a father. And if you're not, then you are allowing the world or some other influence to lead your kids.
Yeah.
You get one shot at this. Yeah. It's absolutely vital. And like we worry about all this other stuff. And the most important things you should care about first is the strength of your marriage and then your kids in that order. And the reason is because kids want to see their parents deeply in love, and they want to have a model. Subconsciously, they crave to have the protection of a loving marriage between a father and a mother. We are programmed with that when we come out of the womb, right? Mm-hmm. And so when that's shattered, their world is literally shattered. Mm-hmm. Right? That's why divorce is so problematic for kids.
Yeah.
Is not necessarily that the kids did anything wrong or that the parents did anything to the kids, even if it's an amicable divorce. You've just shattered their number one source of safety. So that's your priority one, then it's your kids. And so all this man talk and leveling up and all that kind of stuff, you want to be a better father, you want to be a better husband, work on yourself. You know, like you want to change your family's culture, you want to change the outcomes for your family, grow, be better. And so how do we do that? Well, we started with the podcast. We have limited resources, limited time. We're all busy dads. What can we do? Well, let's just start getting good ideas out there. Let's be a one-stop shop for dads to learn and grow and improve. And you know what? If you're single and you're listening to this and you don't have kids yet, you know the best time to learn how to be a dad before you become one. Do you know how many mistakes I made that I wish I could take back, where if I would have been listening to stuff like this or consuming stuff like this, I would not have made?
Yeah. And it's funny because when I had Nick Kumalatzis on, you know, he goes, "Oh, Denny, you're not a dad? Good.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
Exactly.
Unfuck yourself now."
Exactly.
You know, because
there's less collateral damage.
Yeah, and the values you have now, you're just going to transfer those down, good, bad, and different. So get that shit together and then be a father. Yeah. That's why, like, another reason, I think I said it as a guest on your podcast, is I know I'm going to be a great dad because now I'm like a completely different person and I'm totally unfucked. So that's just, I love that you said that.
Yeah.
It makes total sense, and that's exactly how it should be.
Right. So that's why we started. That's what we've been doing. And the mission is unchanged. We just want to equip men to be the best fathers they can be, because the ripple effects of doing that, you didn't have a dad. You did not have a father figure. You know exactly how painful and how damaging and destructive it was for your life, right? And probably others as a result of it. So look at all those negative ripple effects. Look at how much of that changes if you would have had that, right? So that's why for the dads out there struggling and striving, like, we see you. I understand the pain, the fear, the struggle, the anxiety, all that kind of stuff. Like the reason we did this was to be like, one, help guys realize you're not alone.
Sure.
Like, we all have the same thoughts. We've all done the same stupid stuff. We all doubt ourselves at every turn. And we also need to keep learning, because life's tough, man. Yeah. And the analogy I use is like, it's a military one, right? But like, do you go to war by yourself? No, you go with the whole freaking rifle company, right? You've got 120 other meat eaters there ready to do battle with you, right? Why do we go into life? Why do we go into fatherhood or marriage? Some of the hardest, the most important, critical, most challenging thing we're ever going to do in life, and just expect that we're going to knock it out by ourselves.
Right.
It's foolishness.
Yeah.
But we've also been told that that's the only way, right? Like, I don't know how that happened or why, but it has to change right now. Like, this generation has to start changing it, or we're not ever going to come back from the brink.
And I think the biggest problem that guys face, and I know it was probably my biggest issue, is not knowing these things existed, coaching programs, and then just thinking that, like, you don't realize, and like I didn't realize until even more recently in engaging with the group of guys that I engage with now, is that so many guys are going through that shit.
Yeah.
So many guys are struggling with their vices. So many guys are not being the father or the man or the husband that they need to be, and you think you're on an island by yourself, but you're really not.
Yeah. It's you brought up Nick Koumalatos, man. Like, that's what he literally wrote a book on this, right? It's like it's not like a military problem. It's not a special forces problem. You're a man. You probably have identical problems to other dudes. There's going to be different veneers. It's going to look slightly different, but again, that root issue, that same pain, that same fear, it's almost identical, man. Like, I know from experience now, because we're on, like, by the time this airs, we'll be on like episode 80 or whatever, right? So that's 75 plus different guys from differing walks of life, and I've heard the same sentiments, the same pain, the same fear from almost every single one of them.
Yeah.
Drastically different situations, drastically different lives, and you know what? It's because we're men, and we are simple creatures, and I don't say that as a bad thing. It's actually a good thing, because once we just lose the act, we put down the pretense, put down the masks, you know what? It's really simple to fix. It's going to take a lot of hard work.
Yeah.
But it's really not that complex. You just need a few tweaks.
It's like what I say with, when I ask people or tell people that this is my process, right? Like setting standards, creating habits, executing accountability. That's my process. And I tell people that, like, it's easy to implement.
Yeah.
It's fucking hard to do every day.
Right.
And I think that's the point that you're alluding to there. And I think it's important to call that out, because it's easy to start something, but it's hard to finish. It's hard to be consistent. It's hard.
But choose your hard, right? Like, so
100%.
How hard is your life right now? Do you want things to stay the same?
Yep.
Do you want to keep wrestling with you listening right now? Do you want to keep dealing with all this stuff that you got going on?
Yeah.
Or do you want to try and change it? I pick this hard over here, where it's like, I'm going to make mistakes and it's hard work or whatever, but you know what? All this other stuff's getting a lot easier.
Exactly.
I don't want to go back to George from 5 years ago. That guy sucked. That guy was miserable.
And that hard when you're doing it is easy, right? When you're not doing those things, it's easy.
Yeah.
But it's gonna be fucking hard later, and I found that out the hard way.
Mm-hmm.
I found that out the hard way, and now I just do these things and embrace these values that life's fucking easy now.
Yeah.
Like, it really is.
Yeah, and to your point, like, the concepts are few, the methods are many, right? Like, I don't have like one blueprint and like, oh, do it my way on everything or else. Like, that's not real life. Like,
I never tell people to use my process.
I teach principles, right? Like, they're foundational principles that you need to master and take to heart, like, embed within yourself and make it part of your core beliefs. And once you do and start executing on whatever methods are working best for you, everything changes, right? But you have to change inside first. You can't just do actions and hope that it's going to, like, stick. Because that, like, here's the example. Like, people go, they pay Tony Robbins, whoever, right? Tons of money, go to the event, and they have this high weekend, right? Like, oh yeah, I'm going to change my life. And they go right back and go exactly back to who they are. Why? Well, it's because they didn't actually fundamentally change their core. They didn't change their belief system. They didn't change their values.
They had an experience.
They had an experience, right? And I'm not saying that you shouldn't do those things, because if you're actually changing who you are and then you go to have one of those experiences, it hyper accelerates your process, right? But you have to make the change within you first. And so, like, that's why it's a principles, core belief issue, not an actions issue. Now, there are obviously behaviors we want to change, right? But you can't only, like, okay, let's use alcoholics or whatever, right? You have to stop drinking first to, stop, right? But to beat alcoholism, you have to stop drinking, right? But it doesn't just stop there. There's a whole 12-step process, right? It's like changing you from the inside out and changing the way you think about things and believe about things. It's like, okay, we're the same way about everything in life, but for some reason we convince ourselves that it's like, it's either too hard or, it's just not that big of a problem or whatever.
I think the biggest problem that you run into, and I've talked about this 1,000 times, is the delayed gratification. you can start one of those processes, but you want the results right away.
Yeah.
So people were afraid to even start because they're worried, they can't see the end result, right? Like, and I say it all the time, pick a process. Don't take mine. If you want to try mine, use it, great. But, I don't charge for coaching. I'm not trying to be a coach or any of that shit. But I think that you can essentially if you set aside, your core values or embrace a particular set of core values and implement that every single day, 12 to 18 months, you can be whoever the fuck you want to be.
Yeah.
I've said that. I have clips everywhere of me saying that because I truly believe it. I've done it.
No, it's like literally my story. Like 2 years ago is when I really started to look in the mirror.
Same. Yep.
Really started to ask for some feedback, started reading some books and stuff like that. We started the podcast and I was still like, it was about 3 months later where I read the book Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters by Meg Meeker and the book Hero by Meg Meeker. Maybe it was 2 months after we started. Okay. And I was like, oh my gosh. There is so much that I have neglected. There's so much that I have not worked towards. And it clicked for me. And it was like, whoa, there's a lot to work on, George. You're not that good. We tell ourselves that we're awesome, right? We want to believe we're so perfect. That's 2 years ago, man. I feel like I have climbed Mount Everest compared to what that guy was. Like, I have made so much progress, so much change, so much transformation. And it wasn't just one thing. It's a lot of little things. It's the snowball though, dude. It's all rolling downhill now. And like now I recognize dysfunction in my household, like just left and right, and I can root it out before it ever becomes a problem. Like, I mean, you just start operating at a higher level. And that unlock is the most, like, I feel so powerful now. Not in the sense of like I control people or whatever. It's not this like tyrannical sense. Like I feel more self-confident and more self-assurance about who I am and how much of a man I am and all that kind of stuff, all these things we want. Yeah. Because I am actually a husband now. Like I actually lead my wife and lead my family, and I prevent these dysfunctional behaviors that have plagued us for, so long from ever taking root anymore. And I control myself. I don't let my anger have a place. I talked about like having to take ownership, right? I realized that my anger, my outbursts, the harsh words that I would use with my wife is the most dangerous thing in my family's life. It's not some dude who's probably going to come break in or whatever, or the low likelihood that our house gets robbed and someone tries to violently hurt them. No, it was my anger. George's anger was the biggest threat in my family's life. Oof, man, that hurt. That really hurt to admit that to myself.
Do you think that was the biggest threat to yourself as well? Because it's almost self.
No. It was it's wounded
Sorry
George.
To cut you off.
No, you're good. It's little George, 16-year-old insecure George lashing out at everyone else. Because if I hurt them first, then they can't hurt me.
Same.
Right. So, when I tell guys to swallow the hard pill, I did it. Right. Like Same. I'm not telling you to do something I haven't done. Like that's not me, man. I'm a military leader. I lead by example. I lead from the front. Like I don't ask a soldier to do something I wouldn't do myself or have done myself, right? And I prove it that way too. Like I'm first in, last out, right? That's what I do in the military. I do the same thing with my family. I didn't always, but I do now, right? And I realized my anger was the most destructive force in my wife's life and in my daughter's life. Yeah. Man, that hurts. But I bet most men listening to this right now, they really sat down, really wrestled with themselves a little bit. They'd be, ooh, you know what? Me too. Yeah. And that's fine. That's okay. We're talking less than 2 years. Yeah. If you sat my wife down right here and asked her to like tell how different things are, like it would be unrecognizable from who I was. So that I want to give that as hope to everyone listening. And like you said, it doesn't take long. Once you commit and once you embrace it, but you have to make that, it's a heart change first, because you have to commit to yourself, keep the promise to yourself that you can never go back to that version of you. Yep. And that's the commitment piece. You're going to make mistakes. It's habits. They take 100%. A while to change. However, you're making more steps this way than you are going back, right? Yeah. And I've said that before. I said it, I think, when I talked to Steve Ecker when I had him on, is, if I had tried to do this 2 years ago, I would have been lying to myself. I would have been lying to the world. Yeah. And, it's been really cool, because the only person that's really been consistent that would have seen a change in me, that has sees me enough and engages with me enough, is Mike. Mm-hmm. And Mike is always like, dude, the guy you are now, he's like, I
don't even know who the fuck you are. And he goes, I love it.
Yeah.
He texts me once, twice a week. Hey, I'm proud of you. I love the work that you're doing with the podcast. He's like, I'm grateful to be a part of it. Thanks for bringing me along. Like,
Yep.
He's such a great dude, such a great support system. But like to get that feedback from somebody who truly knows you, like you said, you got your wife to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I met my girlfriend, who's incredible.
Yeah.
When I had just started making these changes.
Right.
So she actually has seen a difference in. She has seen a difference in like my anger and my like my temperament and just my overall like how I conduct myself. She's like you're different, but it's better. She's like I like it.
Yeah.
And so she's seen it too. But Mike knew me from the dark days.
Right.
So it's cool to really see that transition and see that come to fruition and be tangible in, like I said, 12 to 18 months.
Yeah.
If you just fucking commit to it and you just do it, you're going to be whoever you want in that time frame.
Yeah, and I'll make this point too. It's not like nothing happens until the 12 to 18 month point,
Exactly.
right? Like there's incremental wins along the way, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like the goodness starts coming a lot sooner, but it's like you'll get to this one point where you're like, holy cow, you'll stop for a second and like look back and be like, whoa.
I bet you I was feeling different after 2 months.
Yeah.
But not who I am today. If you would have told, like, after like 2-3 months, I was like, wow, this is, like, I feel good.
Right.
But that's nothing.
Right.
You keep fucking going, and it's like, it just compounds.
Yeah. Right. It is. It's compounding interest. Yeah. And that's the point. That's the point of all this. And it's not to like prove to someone else that you're so special or whatever. Like, it's so that you can live for others. Genuinely, right? You don't need anything back or whatever. You're just genuinely doing the right thing because it's who you are.
Yeah.
And that, like, people ask me, what is a real man? He is. It's that simple. He just is, right? He's not having to, like, act like something he's not in the moment. He's the right thing at the right time in the right place because he is that man, period.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us are still operating like teenage boys where we're acting the part, but deep down, we doubt everything, and we're questioning everything, and we're insecure, and we're afraid of all these things. And you know how you fix that? Again, it's back to the brotherhood thing. You actually get the feedback, and then you start doing the things, and it compounds. And then you arrive. You don't like you never arrive, but you become, right? And you continue to become to whatever life hands you. And it's such a drastically different way of living, and it's empowering and liberating because now you're not victim or stuck by whatever's happening. You actually can take action. You can put things in motion.
Yeah, and with that, I kind of want to transition a little bit over to, your military background, your military service. And something I just thought of was like, you're doing all these things to help build men and help men build character and stronger families and values and all these things. How are you applying those skills, to junior leaders? You're an officer. Your job is to, be a leader, but more importantly, I think, is to create leaders. Yeah. Good leaders. Yep. So are you kind of implementing some of those skill sets that you use to help these men into, that segment of your world where you're doing the same thing for soldiers?
Yeah, so I think it goes both ways. A lot of my program is designed on things that I've learned from the military, right? Leadership is universal, right? Like extreme ownership by Jocko and all this kind of stuff. Like Jocko didn't invent it. Like I'm not taking anything from him. Immense respect for it, right? But it's not like Jocko invented what a leader is, right? Like these are universal principles that men should apply across the board, right? So yes, read the book, learn the things, and then apply it. But so I pulled a lot of my military experience into this, right? Yeah. And it's not to train them to be soldiers; it's to train them to be husbands and fathers and genuine men. And in the inverse, right? The other things I've learned from outside the military that I can inject into the military, right? Like empathy, humility, compassion. I'll give a very stark example, right? So I was active duty for 4.5 years, almost 5, deployed once to Afghanistan, right? So 101st Airborne, field artillery officer. I was a platoon leader. I was pretty good at what I did. I cared a lot. I worked really hard to be a very good leader for my people, right? But if I'm really honest with myself, it wasn't until, fast forward, I had a break in service. I'm in the National Guard now. I'm a company commander. I'd started down this path of growth and changing my mindsets about things. I had more compassion and empathy and was more stoic in situations.
Sure.
I was a million times the officer I used to be because I actually have more compassion and empathy in moments when it's required, right? I didn't treat everything with an iron fist or whatever, right? And stuff I learned as a father made me a better commander, right? Having patience and things like that, right? So I think it goes both ways, but to very explicitly answer, like, how do I apply these things for soldiers? One is give them a chance. We all wanted a chance to prove ourselves, right? Like, that's a good thing. That is a natural masculine desire you should want to try and prove a little bit, like not a chip on your shoulder type of thing, but
No.
yeah, you want to be tested. You want to face adversity. You want to rise to the challenge and make it, so to speak. So give them the opportunity. Like, I had to have some hard conversations with NCOs. I'm like, you're babying the soldiers. Stop.
Yeah.
Well, sir, they'll get hurt or blah. It's land nav for one. Like, they can go get a little bit lost. We'll pick them up, but like, how are they going to learn? Stop treating them like infants. Treat them like soldiers.
Yeah.
Control what you have to. Make it safe, but stop babying them. Give them the opportunities to shine. They'll surprise you.
Yeah.
You know, people talk about, like, oh, kids today are just so freaking weak and blah, blah. No. Leaders suck today. You don't give them a chance to try and fail. And so, like, here, another example, right? We did this, annual training. I set up it's called Sapper Stakes, right? And you march as a platoon. I did platoon competition, right? It's all timed and events and scores and all that kind of stuff. And so every mile, your platoon has to get through like a hurdle of events, that prove either, sapper capability or knowledge or physical, whatever. And, it was hot summer. And so, I had people freaking out like, well, sir, people are going to get they're going to overheat, they're going to get hurt, blah, 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 blah. I was like, guys, it's going to be fine.
Drink some fucking water.
One, I've done this before. It's going to be okay. We're not being unsafe. We're starting at like 2 a.m. so that the sun's not up ever and blah,
Yeah.
All this fear, all this anxiety. The NCOs were convinced that the soldiers couldn't do it and blah, blah, blah. The young privates and whatnot. Oh, they're going to fall out and whatnot. The exact opposite was the case. The platoons, when they got done, they were like hooting and hollering and screaming and like, we did it, and like you could see it in the young soldiers' faces. So that's one. Give them an opportunity because you have to do the same thing with your kids.
Sure.
You have to let them try and fail. Sure. Don't baby them. Believe in them. Your words carry power. Older men in positions of authority, fathers, mentors, coaches, your words carry weight. You talked about the first sergeant who told you, hey, I believe in you. I see the potential you have. Changed your life. Yeah. Changed your career.
Yep.
That's leadership, is recognizing when someone or whatever their potential is and helping them meet it, not to not let any of it be squandered. Yeah. And I had numerous soldiers who served under me who you wouldn't say are, overly gifted people, right? They're as average as can be. They weren't the most physically fit or any of that kind of stuff. But they were some of my best soldiers because they leaned on every word I taught them. They actually applied themselves. They met their fullest potential. Sure. They didn't waste their potential. Yep. So that's the mentor pillar, right? The empathy and compassion stuff, right? If you really empathize first and don't just bark orders, you build connection. You want to talk about someone who's going to do what they'll go through hell for you. Well, you have to earn that through building connection, right? And so it's not, well, I'm the boss, so I said so, do it, right? I could say, well, I'm the commander, so do it. But you should never have to use that phrase. Like, if you have to remind them of your rank, they don't respect you, right? So,
and if they did, they won't anymore.
Right. So there's time for firmness. Make no mistake, right? Like, I had people make very poor decisions, right? And they had to be reprimanded.
Of course.
But again, it was calm. It was stoic. It was, hey, this is the standard. You are doing not the standard. You have 30 days to fix it, or else I'm giving you one last shot type of thing, right? There's a time for firmness and consequences.
Of course.
But it was not anger. It was never like lashing out and that kind of stuff. And I'm not perfect. I'm a human. I make mistakes. But you want to talk about real leadership in the military, don't be a yes man. Have a spine. And you have to grow yourself first, right? You should sometimes push back on your higher ups and be like, hey, sir, not a good idea because of this, this, and this. This is what I recommend instead. Like, that takes some guts. Yep. You want to lead, you got to do it. It's not when it's convenient for you. It's all the time.
100%. And I think that, true leadership is giving pushback. And there's always, I don't care who you are, there's always a way to do it respectfully. There's always a way to just do it the right way. And I just had it. I just had it out with my boss not long ago, and it was just like, and we're friends. I love the guy, but there's always a respectful way to do it. And I told him that. I was like, hey, man, if I can't go to you with my concerns, then I don't trust you, and that's a problem.
Right.
We shouldn't even work together.
Right.
And then you don't have a choice who you work with or for in the military, but there's still that way to do things the right way as far as, and if you're a boss and you're just barking orders, there's nobody's going to respect you. But like you said, if you're showing that empathy and showing that you care, that's a leader.
Yeah, and so, I mean, part of that looks like, I don't know, actually get to know your people a little bit. Like, hey, Private Snuffy, where are you from? What are your interests? And like actually, don't just do it because it's the right thing to do. Actually care about, oh, hey, cool, man. And then find common ground. Oh, you like basketball? I love basketball too. Who's your favorite team? Boom.
Yeah.
You can do that as a senior leader. You want to talk about building esprit de corps. That's a great way to do it.
Yeah.
It's not hard. It's simple. It's just hard to do consistently,
Yeah, and I think just given that, getting to know your soldiers, I think that's so important. Like my platoon leader, Mike Mondello, I love this guy. I remember he shows up to our unit just full of piss and vinegar because that's just the type of guy he is. He runs, he's passionate, he runs hot, he's passionate, great guy. But I remember he shows up to the unit like, new officer, like just really wants to get to know his guys.
Yeah.
Like, and he showed up right away and he was like, I forget who he called out, whatever guy it was. And they did a competition of like who could take apart the saw and put it back together. And so he got in there with the trenches with us and started really bonding and engaging. And if I remember correctly, he beat everyone. Taking that weapon system apart and putting it back together and all of that. But I remember that for me, just right away. Because at first I was just like, oh God. And then I was like, nope, this guy's legit. He wants to know his soldiers. He wants to know. He'd ask questions about, my girlfriend at the time or whoever. And he just always cared. And he's aside from Mike, he's the guy I talked to from the military.
Oh, that's
most.
awesome.
He's a great guy.
Yeah.
But I just love that leadership. And I don't think, like I say, you don't see enough of it in the military, but I think a lot of leaders could be better.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. There's a lot of people in positions of authority who aren't really leaders.
Yeah. I think in the military they do a half decent job of it, but it's rampant in the corporate world, as you know.
Oh yeah.
There's tons. You're lucky if you get, 1 out of 5 leaders is actually good in the corporate world that like truly knows how to lead.
Yeah.
And what that really means, because most of those guys I think in the corporate world are just, how do I cover my own ass?
Right.
How do I keep my own job?
Which is not,
which isn't leadership.
Right. So talking about kind of it going both ways, right? So in the same way that, a commander, you're responsible for everything your company does or fails to do. The buck stops with you, right? So many men. Are you adopting that mentality with your marriage? Are you adopting that with your kids? Are they going to make mistakes? Yeah. Who's still ultimately responsible? It's you, man. It's this guy here. I'm responsible.
Sure.
I can't pass the buck as a commander. Why did I do it at home, right? I did for years.
Yeah.
I blamed her. Oh, it's her fault. And so like this is where this stuff is universal, right? You have to adapt to your audience. You need to apply different methods of leadership, but the universal foundational principles are across the board.
Yeah.
So like that's why all this stuff we're talking about, whether it's fatherhood, military, business, any of this kind of stuff, when you start to level up as a man and apply some of these principles, you naturally start showing up better in all of those arenas, even if you're not in a leadership position. You upward influence. Yeah. You extend beyond the chain of command, right? You bottom up refine situations. And like leaders, what they do is like an example of this. So like let's say it's the corporate world, right? Business is working on a project or you've got some deliverable or something like that. Most people are just going to shut up and do the bare minimum and make 0 suggestions, right? A leader recognizes, hey, this is dysfunctional. Even if you could be the lowest guy in the group, right? The least rank or position or whatever. You recognize the problem, you identify how to actually fix it, and you make the recommendations up. And then guess what? Maybe you actually have a boss who applies it, and it actually helps your entire organization. You don't have the position, you're not a leader by title, but you just provided leadership to all of these people, right? So that takes some masculine strength. That takes some confidence. That takes some intelligence, emotional intelligence to respectfully make the suggestions, all these types of things, right? That's why this stuff is for every man. It's not for people who are only a boss or only a dad. It's for all of us, because at one time, you're going to have an opportunity to provide leadership somewhere.
Yeah.
And so every man should start applying this stuff, just like every man should be physically fit. Every man should challenge what he knows and his beliefs and make sure that he's actually growing. It's so that when the moment arises, you can actually be. He is, right? So.
Yeah. Yeah, man, that's this. It's so much. Even like.
Thanks for watching my TED Talk.
Yeah, no, but even like, it's so much to digest, right? It's. I feel like I've been having, this talk for a long time now. Or it's only been 3 months, but it feels like I've been having this conversation a lot about just all of the things that you just brought up, and.
Yeah, because you're in the process right now. You're fundamentally altering who you are.
Yeah.
For the positive, for the better.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I think I'll probably be in this phase forever of just continuing to try to improve.
I literally just identify new things that now because I have grown into this new level, I now have more strength or more capability to solve this bigger problem. Yeah. And you just keep leveling up.
It's like, what's next?
But it's not tiring. It's actually invigorating. It's the exact opposite of what because it sounds like, oh, well, I leveled up. Now there's more things to handle. That initially sounds like, oh, well, that sounds more tiring or more difficult or whatever. It's actually the other way around.
Yeah.
It gets more simple, even though it's bigger, because your capacity has expanded so far to handle these things. And so, that the cycle doesn't stop because you keep applying the things. Yeah. And man, it's so liberating. Like, it feels so good to actually be able to change the outcome of your life, like in the day-to-day, right? All these little interactions you have, because life is the little moments. Life is not big events. It's the day-to-day little things. The consistency in those little moments is what makes great men versus average men in any field. All of your relationships are deeper when you win in the little moments, right? You take the minute to be like, hey, dude, you seem stressed today. Something bothering you? Yeah, dude, I'm really glad you said that. Can I talk for a few minutes? Yep, love to, man. How can I help you? Or with your wife. Hey, honey, you seem stressed or fearful right now. Are you okay?
Yeah.
If you're on autopilot, you're not going to do any of those things because you have to initiate. So one other thing to kind of blow your mind here, right? The word for man, man means the piercer, to pierce. And so it's not, in the physical mirrors the spiritual, right? So like in the physical sense, a man pierces a woman, right? Sexually, insert. You're supposed to pierce emotionally and spiritually too. Yeah. You're supposed to pierce through the emotions, pierce through to help her with her struggles. Or in this sense, man is an initiator. So you have to take the first step. So if you're on autopilot, you're not initiating anything anywhere.
And that's where things probably break down the most.
Yeah. That's where we talk about that stagnation. If you're stagnant, you're the pond that's turning sour, right? You're becoming poison water. And so then if you think about that, you're not just, I don't beat my wife or I don't yell at her and that kind of stuff. Okay, but if you're stagnant, you are hurting her.
Sure.
You're hurting your family because they're needing you to rise in some area of life, and you're not providing that leadership that they deserve. And like I said, you get one shot at this stuff.
Yeah.
Your kids grow and they're gone, man. That's it. So like if you are a dad, you have the most at stake. If you're a married father, you have the most at stake of any man in the world while your kids are under your roof and while your wife lives.
Sure.
And you signed up for all of it. That's the thing too, is that's where the blame game has to stop, because they may be true. It may be unfair. It may be BS. But like you and I have just talked, like we just both have talked to Seth Gale, right? Like that guy's been through freaking unbelievable hell. And he doesn't subscribe to like, well, it's unfair and all. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
But what's he going to do about it? Like he can only be better today for everything at stake.
You can fucking feel sorry for yourself and become a victim to it, or you can.
And I don't say that to be like I'm not a fan of the like, oh, just suck it up, dude. You know, like be hard or whatever. Like no, that's not working either. Because if you're listening to that and you're like, crap, man, dude, this is me. I have immense empathy for you. Like I know exactly how you're feeling right now because I felt the same way. Like for years, I just felt like there's no way out, right? And my heart breaks for you, right? Like I genuinely feel what you're feeling. And so I'm not saying these things with some firmness because I'm mad at you. I'm mad for you,
Sure.
right? And the only way to change it is to choose for yourself today to make whatever incremental change you can, and just don't give up. And the way that gets a lot easier is, again, brotherhood, because they will be the inspiration for you when you can't that day. Yeah. Just like in the military, you have an off day that your battle buddies pick you up a little bit, right? They cover down for you, all that kind of stuff. It's teamwork, it's camaraderie.
Yeah.
You're designed for it. And I'm in, like, just personal example. I have a group. It's 4 of us, not my co-host. It's a separate kind of professional group. And one of the guys, man, I could just tell he was really hurting. Really, like, his responses were very short and all that kind of stuff, you know. And we're normally very open and we talk about like real stuff. I was like, hey, man, like, I kind of pierced. I initiated. You just seem like something's really weighing on you right now, man. Can you talk about it? You want to talk about it? And I had to kind of pry a little bit, and he started gushing, right? And not like he was broken or whatever. He had a lot to get off his chest that he'd been carrying in solitude, right, in isolation. And he let it out. And at one point, he was kind of going on about these things, and I interrupted him and said, like, well, you're worth it to us, man. It's not a burden to us to hear you out. So if that's you listening and you're like, well, I can't share this stuff with these guys because they have these things going on and blah, blah, blah. We all have stuff going on. It is, like, 99% of the time, I think any man that has even any remote amount of respect or love for you is going to listen, and he's going to feel really good that you were he's the one that you came to share your problem with, because that means inherently that you respect him. It's the mentor pillar, right? Like, he gets to be your hero that day, right, in a sense. And he's not emotionally connected to this problem, this thing you're holding secret, as deeply as you are, because he's a level removed from it, right? It's not actually his problem. It's not his burden to bear. So he can hold that space for you and process it with you. And then it recharges you to go back into. So, like, in this personal example I gave, he texted me, like, the next day. He's like, dude, like, my life is drastically different already. Like, this, you have no idea how much to help. And I'm like, yeah, I actually do, because I needed that. I need that too in my life frequently. Right. And so, like, that's what I'm talking about. So don't beat yourself up. Don't convince yourself that you're a burden to other people, because you're not. We all have crap. And if you hold it in and you don't give someone else a chance to help you with it, it will crush you. It will absolutely crush you. And it's not going to crush him. Your buddy that you reach out to share this thing with, he can take it for you. Yeah. And if he can't, he'll tell you in that moment, bro, I'm really sorry. Now's not a good time.
Sure.
You know? I mean, but don't cut yourself off from the opportunity. Don't decide for yourself because of feeling unworthy or a burden or things like that.
Yeah. No, I think all of that is just incredible stuff, man. Like, what you're doing in the space and everything you're kind of breaking into right now has been awesome. I think we had a great discussion. I don't know if there's anything else that you'd like to discuss or touch upon, but I mean, I'm here.
I'll just close by saying that, like, it has to stop with us. There has to be a call to action for every man. Whatever your situation is, whatever your life is like right now, this generation has to stop it. Like, we can't continue on the course. Like, look at our society. Like, in our lifetimes, look at how drastically worse off society is. And it's because men have passed the buck for too long. And so all these things, I empathize with you. I feel for you. I want to help you. And I can. But I can only show you the door. You have to walk through it. And so collectively, we all need to start walking through our doors in our lives to start changing this situation. So just get to work. Like, we can't, it has to stop with us. There's so much at stake.
Sure.
And I just don't think we can go another generation with this continuing on in the direction it's going. I think the bottom's going to drop out if we don't.
Yeah, I very much agree with that. And I think that's a perfect message to end with. You know, where can people find your coaching materials and get in touch with you personally and, you know, subscribe to your podcast and things of that nature? Because I would definitely encourage you guys to do that.
Yeah. The coaching stuff is theelitesentinel.com. I'll give you the links for all that. I'm on Instagram. It's Elite Sentinel, Elite_Sentinel. We're on all the socials, all that kind of stuff. But the podcast is at The Present Fathers on all the socials, and it's we're on YouTube. That's kind of our big. We have most of our stuff on YouTube, but we're also on all Spotify and all that kind of stuff. The Present Fathers podcast. You can find it pretty much anywhere. I just want to help men win. With the podcast, we just want to help dads level up or future dads have the tools to actually handle it. And man, like all the stuff we talk about is the things I wish I would have known before I started.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can certainly say that, I wish a lot of the resources and the things that you're doing, either A, was available when I could have used them, or B, just I was aware of them.
Yeah.
And I don't think I was. So
yeah,
it's encouraging to see these kind of things,
right.
Taking flight and becoming more prevalent, because like you said, we need it now more than ever.
And, I want to make just one final point. Like, a lot of people are like, well, men shouldn't need a coach. Dads shouldn't need a coach to know how to do these things. You're right. They shouldn't, because their dads should have taught them.
Exactly.
However, I don't live in the world of should be. I live in the world of what is.
Yep.
And the only way to actually affect change is to recognize what is and how to actually change that. And so, unfortunately, we have the situation where I have to exist as a coach for men. I have to help what I used to be not be that way anymore, because I didn't learn it from my dad or from masculine figures appropriately. And so this is how we're going to change it. It starts with me and whoever else, and collectively we all start doing this, and then we actually do it with the next generation of young men and raise them into strong, capable men before they make all their mistakes and damage.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so to critics out there or whatever, if you're the guy who didn't need a coach, good. I'm so glad. That is literally the point of all this.
Yeah.
Like, I want to put myself out of business.
Yeah.
Because that's what society should be. However, it's not. And so be the standard. We have to be the standard and help each other.
Yeah.
We have to help each other get there.
Absolutely, 100%. And I can't thank you enough for being on the show.
Yeah, bro.
We've been talking again for like 5 months. It's been 5 months in the making.
Yeah, dude.
You are our first fan as far as I'm concerned. Very much appreciate it. And again, guys, great guest we had today, George Hayworth. Appreciate you guys checking him out. The Present Fathers on all the socials. Check us out at Be The Standard Podcast on Instagram. And as always, we appreciate all your support and your engagement. And we'll see you next time. Thanks.